finish and then necessarily.
Okay,
now it's okay? Okay, perfect. So welcome everyone, and thank you for joining this local workshop for the Iberian area. Here I'm sharing my screen with the agenda of today's meeting. We are so glad to have the presence of Tina, who is the coordinator of the Microservices project. And she will do an introduction of the project. And then my colleague Pedro, he will show you the tools that I've been working on, they have been working on, and how to use it. Maybe we can do this part in Spanish, as most of the assistants are Spanish. No, I see some international, so we will do everything in English. So please, Tina, if you want to start, go for it.
Thank you. And I guess now my screen is visible.
Yes.
So, buenos dias, everyone, and that's about the extent of Spanish that I can. So I will be speaking in English to you all. So welcome everybody on my behalf as well to this local Iberian workshop of the Microservices project. So our Microservices at your service, bridging the gap between NLP research and industry, has been now our project for almost almost 2 years. So we are at the last leg of this project. Sorry. Okay, so I'll first talk a little bit about the project goals and then introduce the kind of details. So in this project, an European project between Gradient, Linksoft, Reykjavik University and the University of Tartu, our kind of goals were first to reach out to European research community to find NLP tools that would be suitable to be shared with everybody. And then we aimed on packaging those tools and then making them available both on LREC Share and then European Language Grid. So here's the kind of the slide that tells the most of the things. So we started in March 2021, and the project will end at the end of February this year. And Linksoft is a Finnish language technology company, but Gradient you obviously all probably know. And then our university partners are Reykjavik and then University of Tartu. And our original goal was to provide at least 40 tools. So what we did was 60. So we've exceeded the expectations in this way. And the languages that are covered are also quite wide. There's 16 different languages, from Spanish to Faroese, so spanning the most of the Europe and Northern Sami as well. So from south to north, and so fairly east to western parts. And then we also, the idea is that the European Language Grid is the good platform for this. And we also have been co-financed by the Connecting Europe facility. And at this point, I would also like to remind you that all of the opinions presented in this workshop are ours, and they don't necessarily represent the views of the European Union. So that's the disclaimer gotten out of way. So the idea or the background of this whole thing is that in Europe there is lots of strong research and development in almost every country and in almost every language area. And there are quite a few open source software available. But then the global players, Amazons, Googles, and so on, they have limited interest. So they do have basic solutions for larger languages, but they don't usually offer tailored solutions. And then also there might be other privacy issues. So quite a few, for example, if you're working on the medical domain or otherwise, the customers don't want their data to end up in the US, for example. So the data must stay also in Europe. So here in this picture, we have digital language equality scores from the European Language Grids. This kind of they have this kind of a dashboard where you can view and add languages that you are interested in and see how they fare with these technological factors. And you can see here that for English, the score is the highest, over 70,000. I don't really know what the factor actually describes, so we are just interested in the kind of ratios between the factors. Then Spanish is the next one, so it's about half. And then Finnish is surprisingly the next, and then it's again maybe a half of what Spanish was. And then there's a Portuguese, then Swedish, Standard Estonian, Catalan, Lithuanian, Latvian, Lithuanian, Norwegian, Basque, Icelandic, Galician, Northern Sami, and Faroese, where there's only a tiny bit of tools available. So this project also slightly addresses this. Of course, most of the tools we have provided are in the languages that are already here at the top, but we have also provided some of these small tools for the smaller languages. And then obviously, if there's research and those tools become available, then they should also come available at the ELG without our project as well. So basically, why use open source NLP tools? Basically, they are available. They get you to the state-of-the-art research. And especially with kind of established research groups who have been developing their algorithms for a long time, the tools are often also reliable. And then, of course, there are exceptions, but most of the time, the use and modification of these tools is also free of charge. But then it might be a little difficult to find exactly the suitable tool for my problem. Then if the tool is kind of described in some GitHub, the documentation and the support for the tool may be missing or incomplete. And even if it's perfect, I still do not know if the tool works for my problem without kind of doing a git pull and taking care of all of the dependencies and getting it running on my machine. So it's quite a bit of an effort to just try out whether this tool is suitable. And then if I get it working on my machine, will it work on yours? That's also an additional kind of a question. So even if it works on my machine at Linksoft, it will not be kind of like production ready, but that needs to be running in some servers. There might be other dependencies and other issues. So all of these things need to be taken into account when you're working with any tools, but especially now with the open source NLP tools. So the solution, or at least part of the solution, is containerization. So basically packaging the software that is the tool with all of the dependencies. So basically all of the libraries, the operating system and everything into one software package. And most often what we use, and we also talk quite a bit of Dockerization, but containerization is the kind of the keyword that is sort of like software name independent. And then these images can be easily shared and then put running on a server. And then you can have several different packages, several different containers running in the same server. For example, at Linksoft, we have one of these tools, which is made in Java, which we normally don't use at all. We use Python and C. But it doesn't matter because it just runs there nicely in its container. And then what it helps with is then that you can start building an architecture. So here are the puzzle pieces are the open source containers in a Docker. And then you put it on some kind of a cloud service platform. Then there are nice and easy APIs to access these tools. And then they can be just, plugged in and used. Maybe a little bit of work to make sure that the APIs, for example, here at this level, that the client's needs are fulfilled. So there might be some conversions compared to what comes out of here. And then you can also have some third-party cloud APIs and then just a proxy container that is calling the third-party tool. So that is also possible. So this makes life a lot easier. So I already said that our purpose was to put these tools on the European language grid. We have had several presentations already in our previous workshops about the European language grid, and these videos are available on the project website. I'll advertise it a little later. So Ian Roberts from European language grid team, and then last week Katrin Mahaneke have also presented like the totality of the platform. So I'll just give a brief overview and then refer to kind of follow the official sources for more information. So basically it's a scalable platform. It was started as a Horizon 2020 project, and now it has a life of its own after the project as well. So basically it's made in Europe. It's public funding, so it shouldn't disappear like on the whims of American companies. And it's made for the European language technology community. And there are tools and services. There are language resources like corpora, models, other things like that. There's also information of resources elsewhere. There's a description of European language technology companies and research organizations, and also their projects. And all of the services that are hosted, there's quite a few that can be tried out via the web UI or via the APIs. So they have like running services there as well, including all of ours. And I checked the statistics on Monday, and at that time there was almost 7,200 corpora, almost 3,700 tools and services, and so on. So there's quite a bit of resources there. And I kind of recommend that you go and search for those tools. There's also kind of a faceted search with which you can choose a language and choose a tool type and such to help finding the correct tool. And then there's very thorough and constantly updated documentation for both the consumers of the ELG tools and then also providers of new language resources and technologies. So if any of you have tools of your own that aren't there yet, please go and add your tools if it's possible. And then I would also like to recommend this newsletter on European language technology. It's published or it was created by the ELG project and the sister project European Language Equality, or ELE, and all of the newsletters are archived on this website, and you can order kind of like make a subscription and order your own. For example, some of our tools were now kind of advertised, or not our tools. The tools are originally made by the National Library of Finland, but we made the proxy so that they can also be accessed now via the ELG. And then for our project, then obviously the European Language Grid has provided a larger audience, getting feedback from users and getting the tools in one place. They have lots of documentation and standardized APIs. So inputs and outputs and error messages need to be of a certain kind so that the tool gets accepted to the ELG. And they have a validation process when you submit something. So kind of like get that kind of making sure that what we did was correct. They have software development kits and test scripts, and they've also helped us in debugging and making services available. And then like I said, the newsletters and events, so they are dissemination channels, and they've also participated in our workshops, which I really appreciate. So this has been very, very useful for us. But then a few words about the future. So European Language Grid project has ended. The ELG is there to stay, but then there's now a new initiative called European Language Data Space that just the initial signatures were kind of made, I think, for the project last week or 2 weeks ago. And then basically what they said, there's not much news about this European language data space yet, but anyway, they say that these existing repositories such as LREC Share and European Language Grid will be interconnected with the LDS. So future development will be done via this European language data space program, so to say. And then the exhaustive list of the tools is on our project webpage, and at the ELG I'll show you a little later how to find those, but here are some examples, or well, quite a few examples. So most of our tools are for text. So we have named entity recognition, we have machine translation for English, Icelandic English. If you happen to need to read Icelandic, that's now easier. There are sentiment analysis tools for both Swedish and Spanish, general linguistic analysis tools, morphological analysis tools, then language models, question answering, and such. Then we have also some multilingual tools for language identification from text, and then 2 sets of tools for speech and audio. So speech, like spoken language identification, and then a tool for aligning text and speech. that works for Finnish, English, Estonian, Northern Sami, and Komi, and also keyword and topic modeling types of tools. So where are these tools then? So everything is in ALG, and our project webpage has a list under project results. So all of these tools are listed there with a description telling which languages it serves and where are the Docker images. So the Docker images are in Docker Hub, but they can also be downloaded from the ELG. So links are there for all of those tools. So this is an easy way to find them. And then obviously, because none of these tools are developed by us from the start, we of course also give credit to the original creator. And then at the European Language Grid, we have a project page for microservices at your service. And there's the related LRTs and projects tab. And not sure if I mentioned it, but all of these tools can be tested out via the tryout tab if you just register, and you can get the Docker images. So this is what it looks like. So there's the project name, there's a general overview describing the project, and then there's a second tab listing all of these tools. And then when you click each of these, then you end up in the project, in the tool page like this. And then again, here, there's like an overview tab. Then there's download and run where you can get the actual tool or kind of get information on how to run it or via the API. And then there's a kind of a web form on the tryout tab where you can just put your own text, for example, and try it out. So Pedro is going to show how these tools work later on. So I'm just showing screenshots now. And in the LRIC share, which is the kind of slightly older repository of the European Language Resource Coordination, it serves as a sort of like a phone book. So these tools are also all listed there. So these records link to also our GitHub or GitLab where the source code to make the Docker is available. So that can also be used as if you decide to make the Docker yourself or need help, there are kind of like examples then there. Then there's the Docker Hub link, and then the link to the ELG as well. And all of these tools can be found with the faceted search. So in the kind of left sidebar, you can filter by funded projects, and then the microservices at your service project is the one. And here we actually list 62 resources instead of 60 because there's 60 at the ELG. Then there's one tool for which there is a Docker, but the ELG, the input and output formats weren't compatible, and ELG couldn't accommodate us during this time. So there's only the Docker at the moment. And then there's one additional proxy container that was needed for a tool that is running at another server. So that explains why there's 62 here and 60 in ELG. But yes, so I recommend really trying this out for yourself. You might have, of course, already, but basically what you need to first do, if you haven't, is to register. The registration form is slightly hidden on kind of like in the web page on the top right corner. There's this kind of a symbol of a human, and then if you click it, it's kind of says sign in, and then under the sign in it says register, and then you can just fill in your name and affiliation and email, check the verification email, and then you're ready to try this out. So it's really that easy. It takes a little while to start the service if it hasn't been used for a long time. So if you try it out for the first time, there's a bit of a delay, but then if you try it again in a short while, then the next calls are a lot faster. So don't get scared. Okay, I have been kind of going through these slides quite quickly, but anyway, I would like to also say that if you now end up trying our tools, it would be also nice to hear about this. So you obviously might be kind of using the Iberian tools provided by Gradient. So please let the Gradient team, Pedro or Carmen or others, know if you kind of end up finding something useful, because we need to also report to EU that these tools, that we have kind of spread the word about these tools, and if they also find users, then that's the impact part, so they appreciate knowing. But then we obviously share anonymously the numbers or kind of general areas, but nothing kind of particular unless you give us a permit to do that. And then so part of the spreading the word are the workshops. So we have a special website for our workshops, where, well, you've been there if you've registered to our final workshops already. And there are also videos of past workshop, and this is going to go there as well, once we've gotten it subtitled and everything. And then the first workshop we held already in June 2021. And that was explaining how to add an API to your tool and how to put it in a Docker. So it's there. If you need that kind of a resource, please go and watch it, and hopefully it's useful to you. Then last year we had another workshop more specialized on the ELG. There were 2 sessions, and one of them is also on the project webpage. And this is the one where we had ELG representative explaining in depth how the ELG platform works and what are the intentions. So it's also a very good kind of resource if you want to know more. And then the final workshops, that's these. So basically we had a general workshop in last Friday, and the recording will be coming. It has partly the same information as here, but then the kind of some of the things are somewhat different. And then these local workshops, we had the Finnish workshop yesterday, of Finland and Scandinavia, and then there's the Estonian and then the Iceland area ones are still coming, and you can still register for those. And that concludes my part of the talk. So then on to you, Pedro. Pedro, if you're saying something, I don't hear anything.
Okay. I think now you can hear me. Can anyone confirm?
Yes.
Sí.
Okay. So I will start again. I was saying that I'm going to talk about how to use tools that are hosted in the ELG. So these are the points that we are going to talk about. First of all, about the ELG infrastructure, also about the Python SDK that the ELG provides to us for using their tools. The third point is how to browse tools in the catalog. And then we will go into how to call the services in the ELD and different functionalities that they provide as pipelining tools. Also about the corpus, and finally about deploying the tools locally in our own machine. So the first point is the ELD infrastructure. This is a simple diagram similar to the one that Tina showed before, where we can see that this is the ELD Kubernetes cluster, where the user can make a request to a server that then calls the corresponding tool that the user wants to use in each case. The point here is that they provide a unique API that is the same for all the tools. So this makes the experience really simple for the user because it's the same for all the tools. Okay, so the type of tools or type of requests that the tools require are these different types that are the text request, the structured text request that is for more complex requests that involve, for example, JSON structures. Also audio and image requests for tools that need each kind of input. So how do we use these tools? The ELD provides an API and Python library that you can see here, the documentation. It's really well explained. So, and from here you can get all the information you need. We will go a bit deeper in how to use this library in the following slides. But first of all, we want to know when we have a need for a functionality, which tool can be useful for us. So we need to explore the catalog of the ELD to see which tools are available there for our purposes. So there are two functionalities: browsing services and browsing corpus. And once we find a tool or a corpus or a service, we have to authenticate and call the service with a request and or getting the corpus. So how do we use this catalog? Here. This is the catalog interface where you can see listed all the tools that are here available in the ELD. And you can just search by text, or you can use these filters to find, for example, I will put as an example a tool for Catalan, which is for example, question answering. So we find here this tool that we uploaded to the ELD. So we can see here all the information about it. So for example, the language that allows for input, a sample of the input text, and some information about the resource provider, if it has been founded by any project, or also the landing page of the tool, like probably is the GitHub, and some other information like it has a paper related or something like this. Also here we have some information about where is the Docker image, if it is public, and also a tryout interface for using it here and make maybe a quick test to how to use it or to see how does it work. And finally, some code samples to call to make requests to the tool with using curl and using Python also. Okay, so Now I'm going to go to the how to use the Python SDK. So we now are going to see some code snippets. Here is the functionality of browsing the catalog using the Python library. I personally recommend you using the web interface to find services or tools because it's more intuitive and easy to use. I think that using these requests, but in any case, it's more useful for you. You can also use this library. It's just it's simple really, but you can see that if you use the catalog class, you just have to make a search with the search method, indicating the languages and the functionalities that you want to find. For example, in this case, a machine translation for the languages, EUS, that means the Basque language, and English. So you will have the results listed like this. So for example, you can see here this Batua machine translation tool. And here it's important to focus in the ID, that is the identification number that we will use later to use the tools. So now, once we have a tool identified that we want to use, we have to authenticate in the ELD. The first step is that you have to be registered, as Tina showed before, how to do it in the ELD. So once you have an account in the ELD, you just have to get a token to use as input in this in your requests. And so the first time you call a service from Python, it will give you a link like this that just send you to the ELD website and ask for you to push your password and login. And once you are logged, it gives you the token that is valid for a couple of hours. If you want, you can also get a token that it's forever, and if you use it with the parameter offline access, so that the next time you use it, you don't have to make this authentication, and you just can use as input this token. Also, you can save this token in a JSON file that will be read by the library automatically in the next times you use it. So once you are authenticated, the next step is just use the services that are hosted in the ELD. So I will go into some examples. The first one is Twilbert, that it's a tool for hate speech detection in Spanish. So I will show you a bit here the overview, but the important thing here is like the examples that are here. So for example, this is a neutral sentence that is labeled as not hateful. As Tina said before, maybe the first time you run this may take a bit. So let's hope it's quickly. But in any case, it's just an example to show you how does this work. Okay, so it's during more than I expect, so I will jump to the next. So here is the first example of how to use this using a curl request. You just have to indicate the token, the text you want to use as input, and the link of the tool, the endpoint of the service that you can see it here in the code samples in the curl part. So now going to the Python library is, you can see here, this example is as simple as that, and it will be as simple as this for all the tools. So you just have to, using the service class, get the service object for this tool using the ID, and just use as input the text, and you will have a result like this in a JSON. So in these both examples, you can see one that is labeled as not hateful, and the other one that is labeled as hateful. So this is the simple case using the plain text request, but we can use some different alternatives, like using a file as input. So if we have the text in a file, we can indicate the path to the file, and it will get the file instead of the text. And as you can see, the result is obviously the same because it's the same text that used in the previous example. And also use a request object. In this case, it's a text request object because it's a tool that requires text as input, but it may be a image request or a audio request, for example. So here you previously have to create the text request object, indicating the content, that in this case is just a text, but may have some other parameters. And instead of sending the plain text, you send the request object and get again, obviously, the same result. Now I'm going to show some, well, similar examples in technically terms, but for other tools that we have containerized and uploaded to the ELG for some other languages of the Iberian Peninsula. So this is NLPnet, that is a tool that makes part of speech tagging for Portuguese. So in this case, what you will see is a bit more complex structure in the output. So here, if we use this input, we will get the kind of word that is each word. So for example, O is an article, rato is a noun, row is a verb. So this is the structured text request type of output. Now this is Berta, that it's a model for Catalan for question answering. Is the one that we saw in the catalog in the first example at the beginning. So in this case, the text request, you see that it has more parameters. It has a context text, and then in the parameters, you have to put a question. So the model will return the answer to this question using the text in the context. So in this case, it asks when the Super 3 that is a TV program started. So it answers in 1991 according to what's said in the text. Now I'm going to show Kelingua, that is a tool. Okay, now I think this screenshot is not correct, but Kelingua, that is a tool that is for detecting the language of a text and works for all the languages in the Iberian Peninsula, in Spain and Portugal, and also in many others. So in this case, for example, there are two examples for Galician and Basque, and you just have to use the text input, and it will return Galician and Euskara. That is the Basque name for the Basque language. And so now here there is a summary of the different kind of requests that we can make with the Python library and with curl. So to recap, the curl request, and also with Python, the plain text request, the request using file and the specific request for text, audio, etc. So now a more complex functionality that allows us the ELD is pipelining. This is just use some tools as a chain. So for example, I think it's better to see it with the example. Imagine we have the necessity to make a sentiment analysis for Basque, and imagine that there are no tools for this functionality. So what we can do is translate in the first step from Basque to English, and in a second step use English sentiment analysis tool. So with this code, using the pipeline class and indicating the IDs of both tools, we can make in a row all of these two, or it may be in other examples more, executions of the tools. We have this output func parameter that is useful because in many cases you have to adapt the output format of the first tool in the pipeline with the input format of the following one. So using these few lines of code, we will have the result of both tools. First one, the translation to English, and then the sentiment analysis result that in this case is neutral because it doesn't involve a sentiment or emotion here, this sentence. So now we go through corpus. As you can see again, you can search the corpus, well, of course, in the website, in the catalog interface of the website, and also from Python code, using again the search method and indicating that you want a corpus, and then well the parameters in each case. And also here in the right, you can see the Python code to get the corpus, just download it. So now we go into the part of how to deploy the tools that are in the ELD locally. So the point here is that maybe for many reasons, for example, confidentiality of your data, you don't want or you can't use the tool that is hosted in the cloud. So you can download the Docker image and deploy it locally. So with this command here of local installation, indicating the ID of the tool, you can get a Docker compose that if you deploy it, you will have this structure here deployed that, if you remember, it's very similar to the one that we saw in the first slide of the ELD infrastructure. But instead of being in their infrastructure or in their cloud, these containers are deployed in your machine. You need, in this case, the intermediate server for implementing the API. So with this, you can use the same type of requests with, or maybe even use the Python library, but instead of calling a tool that is in the cloud, you can use it in your own machine. So I think this can be very useful. And finally, I will make a recap of the tools that we have made available for the languages of the Iberian Peninsula. So here you can see many tools for Spanish, also for Portuguese, and Galician, and Catalan, and Basque. For the type of tools, well, we have many functionalities. Some for question answering, for language detection, for part of speech tagging that we have shown before. Also, we have some specific functionalities that I think are a bit different from the typical, that, like, for example, false friends detection between Spanish and Portuguese. And, well, then, for example, hate speech analysis and sentiment analysis, and some masked language models that can give you the words that best suits in a sentence in the space that you indicate to it to complete the sentence. So this has been all. As a summary, well, I will talk about what we have learned here. That is mainly how to explore the catalog of the ELG to find the tools that are more useful for our purposes, and then how to use it, especially from Python, and how to deploy them locally. So I hope all of this can be very useful for you and for your NLP tasks to facilitate it. And thank you for hearing us. And if you have any question, you can make it.
Thank you, Pedro, for your presentation. I don't know if anyone has any question, you can raise your hand or you can write it in the question and answer point. Also, if it happens that you try the tools and you have any question, you can write us. We will be glad to answer. Well, if there's no questions, I think we can close this workshop. So thank you everyone for joining. I hope you learned something, and I hope you can enjoy the tools and use it. Okay. Thank you everyone. Bye. And thank you, Tina, for joining too.
Thank you. It was nice to be able to join also this workshop.
Bye everyone.